Hello, and welcome back to an all-new episode of Serialously with me, your host, Annie Elise, and we are going over headline highlights today, which I have to say, there have definitely been some case updates from recent cases that we've talked about, so I want to definitely, just touch on those a little bit first. But before we get into all of that, I hope you guys are all having a great week. It is finally Thursday. It's officially fall. We are in the throes of it. It's November, so hopefully you have something, warm and cozy planned for this weekend. I don't know, maybe. But let's start with some of these updates. There has been a huge update in the Lola Davier case, and if you are not familiar with that case, I did a deep dive on it back in September on my YouTube channel and on the show 10 to Life. It unfortunately isn't on the 10 to Life podcast feed because we didn't launch the podcast until after that, but I will link the video version in the episode show notes because it is a case that when I first was researching it, it not only was haunting and so despicable and disgusting, but just the evil of it, the callousness of it. It happened back in 2022, and Lola is a 12-year-old little girl, or unfortunately, I should say Lola was a 12-year-old little girl, and she was brutally murdered by someone who lived near her family. And not only murdered, but she was tormented in awful, awful ways. Just inhumane things were done. And then when this monster was done killing Lola, she stuffed her body in a storage container and left it near her family's home for them to find her. I mean, absolutely awful. So the update with this case, again, you can go listen to the deep dive, but the update now is that 27-year-old Dabia Ben-Kirid was finally sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Lola. And this is the harshest punishment that she could have been sentenced to. And I believe, to my knowledge, this took place in Paris, France. I believe, to my knowledge, that no woman has ever been sentenced to that. So her family did speak out, very happy and feeling as though they got justice, knowing that although that won't bring Lola back, it certainly is a step forward in the right direction. So in a quote from Lola's mom before she thanked the court, she said, "Even if this won't bring my Lola back, we believed in justice and we got it. We got it." So again, I will link that deep dive for you, but I want to give you a very, very massive trigger warning. It is not an easy case to hear, but that will be in the show notes for you. Another update, we actually talked about this case a few weeks ago on Headline Highlights, and it was the one about, you probably have seen it on the news or on TikTok too, but it was about the three people, the Halloween trio, who went up to this door and were banging on the door. They were caught on Ring camera footage. They were wearing like the scary nun mask, all of these Halloween costumes, and I remember saying it kind of felt like that movie, The Strangers. I think it's called The Strangers, but just super scary. And everybody was trying to identify not only who they were, but was this a prank? After they wouldn't answer the front door, this group went back to around the house to the back door. I mean, awful. Well, come to find out, this Halloween trio has now been identified as family members of the homeowners. A woman, her two teenage sons, and her nephew were the ones behind the masks. And they said that it was all just supposed to be a prank, harmless Halloween fun. But there were two other adults and a child who also were involved in this, that although they weren't wearing the masks and banging on the door, they were apparently in the street recording all of this going down. Which, first of all, let's talk about that, because in a day like today, pranks like that just don't fly because there are so many very real threats that you can't do something like this, right? But also, imagine for a moment you were that family who put the Halloween masks on and thought you were pranking a family member, and then you saw that Ring footage all over the news and everybody was trying to identify you. Everybody was talking about it. Like, you've got to feel like a complete idiot, right? I mean, you thought that this would be some funny prank. Not only did you terrify your family, which is not funny at all, but everybody in the world heard about you and was seeing what you were doing. It's just like, for two adults to be involved in this, it seems highly, highly irresponsible. And maybe I'm just being a tight ass, I don't know, but I just feel like I would never take my kids to do something like that. It feels, again, very reckless given how much hate is already out there and how fearful people are, but that's just my opinion. There was a quote from the sheriff in which they said, "While this incident may not result in a criminal prosecution, for me, my team, and this community, It represents a moral failure where consequences could result in deadly consequences. And I think that this goes back to the idea that when we first talked about this too, we had talked about, okay, if somebody is scared and they have a firearm on them, who's to say this could not have ended disastrously? So hopefully it's just a very difficult learning lesson for a lot of people or anybody else out there who thinks that this is a funny prank, because obviously it's not. And I'm just glad that Halloween's over. Now let's talk about the Emmanuel Haro case, because this is a case that we've been talking about for several weeks, actually probably more than a month now that I think about it. And Emmanuel is the little boy who reportedly has been murdered by his two parents, his father Jake and his mother Rebecca. They first had reported him as missing with this completely fictitious story about her being hit to the ground in a Big Five parking lot and Emmanuel being kidnapped. Within days, the two of them were arrested, and it appeared early on that Jake was cooperating with the investigation, even leading the investigators to where a potential dump site may have been for Emmanuel's remains. However, when law enforcement got there, they were unable to find Emmanuel, so the thought was maybe Jake didn't remember exactly where they placed him. Perhaps animals got to his little remains because he was under a year old. He was very, very small. And so anyway, they had both been arrested, and Jake, the father, has now pled guilty to murder charges, while the mother, Rebecca, maintains her innocence. And I don't understand how you can maintain your innocence when you're the one who also created the lie about the kidnapping and about you being hit to the ground, unless she's trying to argue that she only aided in the cover-up after Jake murdered him, which could very well be possible. Jake also has an extensive history of his own and had abused his 10-week-old daughter years ago to horrific conditions. So we're going to see what comes with that. Rebecca was scheduled originally for a pretrial settlement and hearing on October 28th, but it got rescheduled to January 2026. Now, getting into Jake. This week, Jake was sentenced, and as you know, Jake is the father of missing Emmanuel, who, by the way, still has not been located. So he was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison. This was after he pleaded guilty to Emmanuel's murder. He was also sentenced to over 6 years in prison for other offenses, all to run consecutively. He, of course, is ineligible for probation because he was already on probation for severely hurting another child, his daughter, from years ago, which don't even get me started on that. I went into a whole deep dive of it when this case first broke, but there is no reason he should have even been free to be able to hurt Emmanuel, in my opinion. But even this sentence, 25 years to life, I get it. That is a serious sentence. But in my opinion, it is way, way, way too light, especially since he has already been convicted of hurting his daughter years ago. Like, this guy should get, honestly, the worst possible punishment available. I just feel like 25 years to life is not enough for being a repeat offender and hurting the most vulnerable, your own children. Now, Emmanuel's grandmother, the maternal grandmother, Mary, during all of this, she addressed the court during Jake's sentencing, and she said, which I thought was really interesting, she said, "He destroyed my family. Everybody in my family, all my children are destroyed by this." She also said, "He changed my daughter. We don't know who she is. He kept my daughter away. I don't know what he did or how he changed my daughter's life, but she was never the same person after she went to live with him." And I find this very, very interesting because very early on when this case first broke, a lot of photos came out of Rebecca, and I'm going to show them for you in the video version of this episode on YouTube. But this isn't to give her a pass at all. She is just as guilty, in my opinion, whether she was complicit in the murder itself or the cover-up. I don't care. She's complicit. She harmed her baby and ultimately did not get him justice. But I will say this, in photos of Rebecca, pre-Jake, before she met Jake, she looked like an entirely different person, at least to me. And now, even before she was arrested, she looks broken down, she looks run down, and like she doesn't look like the same person. And that's something that I had mentioned very early on. So now hearing her mom saying how he changed my daughter, she was never the same after she went to live with him, I think it's also pretty clear through these photos that she did change. And again, that's not to give her a pass or excuse her behavior and her actions or her lack of actions, certainly not. But it does give an illustration of just how much control seems to have been in that relationship and what, a power player, I guess, if you will, Jake was. It's just very unsettling, but I wish he got a bigger sentence. I think that this is inexcusable. I think that it is way too lax for what he did. We still don't even know where Emmanuel's remains are. We don't know what happened to him, what they did, like why this happened. It's just, I don't know. It infuriates me. And so I'm going to be watching this and continuing to watch it as we get more information. And it's just incredibly sad. So lots of updates obviously happening this week, but there are some new cases that I want to share with you. And not just me, but Amy is also in studio joining me today. So she has a case she wants to share with you too. So I'm going to pass it to her for this first one, and then I'm going to come back with you and share some more.
I can't believe that Halloween prank ended up being family members.
I know. Like,
I'd be
honestly,
so pissed.
I'd be furious.
That's not funny.
And like, what, now you're all gonna just like have Thanksgiving together and like
not. No.
act like everything's okay? Like,
absolutely.
Split the wishbone. I wish you were never not a part of this family. Like, get out of my face. Get out of my face.
All right, let's get into this next one. It's one that makes you stop and think, like many of these other ones, like, how did things get this far? It's the case of Katie Austin Lee, who's a 39-year-old mother who committed an unthinkable act against her son Austin in February earlier this year. So in the early morning hours of February 21st, police were called to an apartment in Holland Township, Michigan. The woman who made the 911 call, Katie, told dispatchers, quote, "My son won't stop breathing." To which the dispatcher responded, "He won't stop what?" So Katie repeated, "Breathing." She went on to say that her 17-year-old son Austin didn't want to turn 18, and that he had asked her to help him die. And she was very calm when saying this. She didn't seem upset like you would expect from any parent in this situation. Listen to this.
Adam 911.
Hi, I need an officer here immediately.
Okay, to where?
Bay Point Apartments, 791 East 16th Apartment.
Okay, what's going on?
My son won't stop breathing.
He won't stop what?
Breathing?
He won't stop breathing?
Right.
Okay. Like, is he, like, breathing too fast?
We were going to leave yesterday, and it got way out of hand. And I couldn't get him to stop breathing like he made me promise to do.
Okay, so is he asking you to, like, kill him? I don't understand.
Yeah, that's what I've been doing for a while, and I can't get him to stop breathing.
Okay, hang on one second here. How old is your son?
He is going to be 18 tomorrow, but he didn't want to turn 18.
So within minutes, officers arrived at the apartment. When they walked in, the first thing they saw was Katie standing there, holding this knife. And of course, they asked her to drop it. She refused, but eventually she did drop the knife and then quickly picked it back up. But when she reached down for it, the officers had to use a taser to subdue her. And as they moved further into the apartment, that's where they saw Austin lying on the ground unresponsive with his throat cut. Paramedics attempted life-saving measures, but Austin was pronounced dead at the scene shortly after. Police noted that Katie showed little to no emotion while the paramedics were working to save Austin. She repeatedly kept telling them, quote, he didn't want to be here anymore, and kept saying that she, quote, helped him die. Detectives later noted that the scene itself wasn't chaotic. There were no signs of a struggle like you would expect. No overturned furniture, no forced entry, just Katie still armed when officers arrived. It all seemed very calm and didn't make sense with what had just happened, but that quiet, deliberate atmosphere actually did line up with what Katie later told investigators that day. After securing the apartment, Katie was arrested and taken to the Ottawa County Jail for questioning. Katie actually told police that she had wanted to take her own life and that she and Austin had both tried to overdose on prescription medications around 1 p.m. the day before. And about 5 long hours later, Austin passed out. And that's when Katie cut his throat. She decided to cut his throat and his left arm in an attempt to actually end his life. But when he was still breathing several hours later, that's when she made that chilling 911 call. So Katie was arrested, and she was charged with what they call open murder, along with resisting and obstructing a police officer. And for those of you that aren't clear with what open murder is, I wasn't, it basically means that she's charged, and then a jury can decide what degree of murder based on the evidence that's presented in the trial. So it gives the prosecution just a little bit more flexibility in the trial. However, on October 22nd, just 1 week before her trial was set to begin, Katie took a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to second-degree murder, torture, and resisting and obstructing an officer, and the state dropped the open murder charge as a result. So this deal included a sentence of 60 to 90 years, meaning she won't be eligible for parole until she's over 100 years old. And her sentence is scheduled for January 19th, 2026. In her plea hearing, Katie confirmed that she gave Austin a sedative, quote, making him unable to have control over his body, then gave him the mind-altering drug before grabbing the knife and then eventually killing him. You can listen to that here.
Is it true that on or about February 21 of 2025, you were in Holland City, Ottawa County, Michigan?
Yes.
Okay. And you are the mother of Austin, correct?
I am.
And on that date, he was 17 years old, a minor?
Yeah.
And did you administer a drug or a sedative to him?
I did.
As a result of administering that drug or sedative to him, was he unable to have control over his body?
He was.
I'm sorry?
Yes.
So you administered a drug and thereby he no longer had physical control of his body, is that true?
True.
And then you then exercised physical control over his body, is that fair to say?
Yeah.
And while you had him under your control, did you intentionally inflict severe mental pain or anguish on him?
Yes.
And did you administer a mind-altering substance to him?
Yes.
And that was done deliberately?
Yes.
And by the administering of that mind-altering drug, did that disrupt his sense of personality, his senses or personality?
Yes.
You then, is it true that while he was under your control and unconscious, that you then had a knife? Is that true?
Yes.
And did you cut his arm on at least 2 occasions?
Yes.
And then did you also use that knife to slice his throat?
Yes.
As a result of you slicing his throat, did that result in his death?
So family members have started a GoFundMe for Austin's celebration of life. They said, quote, Austin was caring, humorous, playful, and most of all, loved and cared for his family and friends. He loved video games and all things space and galaxy themed. And someday we plan to launch his ashes into space on an actual rocket ship for his final destination. It was truly an honor to have known him, and he will be deeply missed. So obviously we will keep you posted on any updates, and hopefully we will get a little more clarity on why this whole thing may have happened in the first place. But of course, feel awful for Austin and his whole family.
Yeah, I can't imagine a 17-year-old just deciding, I don't want to live at 18 anymore. Let's do this like dual self-harm pact with one another. And then the mom carrying that out. It makes absolutely no sense. I also have never heard of anybody going into space with ashes, but that does feel like the next step in the world.
Well, I was just thinking too, like if he's turning 18, was he about to leave and she was like one of those parents that just, didn't want him to,
Yeah, I don't think he was the root
Oh,
of
no,
this.
of course
Yeah,
not. But
yeah,
like
I
what
don't
was
think
the
he
root of
actually
him
wanted
maybe
it.
wanting to leave? Or
I know.
who
Oh,
knows?
it's so sad. Now, before we get into this next case, let's talk about something that we should all be investigating. And that is what's going inside our own bodies. Your liver, it's basically the crime scene investigator of your system. It's constantly working behind the scenes, collecting evidence, filtering through all the junk, and keeping everything running smoothly. But even the best investigators, they need a little backup. And that's where Dose for Your Liver comes in. It's a clinically backed liver health supplement that supports your body's daily function, things like digestion, energy, and metabolism. And it's not a pill or a powder, it's a quick 2-ounce liquid shot that tastes like fresh squeezed orange juice. 0 sugar, 0 junk, 0 calories. Now, when I first tried Dose for the first time, I will say I did notice that I wasn't dragging throughout the day or hitting that like mid-afternoon crash or slump. My body felt like it was running the way that it was supposed to be. I felt energized. I felt like on top of it, kind of like everything was finally just lining up. So if you're ready to solve the mystery of why you've been feeling off, check out dosedaily.co/AE or enter AE at checkout for 35% off your first subscription. That's dosedaily.co/AE for 35% off your first month. Okay, so I want to talk to you guys about the Caitlin Tracy case really quickly. Now, we first covered this story back in May. It was a bonus episode at the time. It was for subscribers only. There wasn't a ton of information on it, but everybody was kind of like, everybody now is glued to it. Even back then, I certainly was glued to it because none of it made sense. It was this beautiful young woman who was found literally pulverized at the bottom of her staircase of their complex and had been having some disputes with her husband, but there was no arrest and like nothing made sense. And so now everybody's talking about this case. I'm seeing it all over my feed, but I want to break it down for you and walk you through the case, and then I'm going to share with you the important updates. Caitlin was the kind of woman who people really admired. She was ambitious, she was determined, she kind of built this life that seemed really well balanced. I mean, a mix of like career success, friendships, all sorts of things. She even had a recent marriage to a really respected lawyer. So from the outside, it kind of looked like this power couple who was in the making, right? But as we know, behind closed doors, things were far from perfect because just 6 months after the wedding, a discovery was made that completely shocked everybody. A severed foot was found inside the building where Caitlin and her husband lived. And moments after finding the foot, the pulverized body that it belonged to was also discovered. So what exactly happened here? It's a question that investigators are still trying to completely answer. So in 2024, 36-year-old Caitlin Tracy, like I said, looked like she had it all. She had a condo in Chicago, a vacation home in a lakeside Michigan town, and this new husband that she was just absolutely obsessed with. On top of that, she had a really bubbly, super personable personality, a sarcastic sense of humor, and she was just stunning. She had long, dark, shiny hair, perfect white teeth, hazel eyes, which hazel eyes with dark hair. I mean, it's such a great look. But she wasn't all looks. I mean, she had brains too. She even graduated college a year early with a business degree in hospitality management. She ultimately landed a job in data analytics where she became chief people officer, which it's a super high up executive position where she was in charge of seeing lots of employees. So everyone who knew Caitlin was really impressed with how put together her life seemed. Even her style was perfect. I mean, she loved everything fashion, design. She was just so well put together. Now, in the spring of 2024, Caitlin married her husband, 46-year-old Adam Beckerink. And this was after the two of them had dated for just a couple of years. Adam had shaggier hair that was starting to turn gray. He had blue eyes. He had a very prominent T-shaped cleft chin. And he was this bigwig tax lawyer. So he was working pretty much all the time. Later that year, in the fall of 2024, Caitlin, for whatever reason, decided to step down from her job. And the full details as to why she decided to leave her position are not super clear. But it kind of seems like she was ready for just a little break of sorts, which seemed a little weird or surprising, but I think sometimes too, maybe you just need a break, maybe when you're in a high up position, I don't know. But then on October 27th, 2024, something even stranger happened. Because that day, Caitlin's husband Adam contacted the Chicago Police Department to file a missing person report for her. He told the cops he didn't know where she was. The last time he had ever seen her was 2 days earlier. And even weirder, nobody else in her life had any clue as to where she might have been. No friends, no family members, no one. It was really, really unlike Caitlin because she was usually pretty good about keeping up with all the people in her life. Now, Adam also told the police that the reason why he hadn't reported her as missing or even realized she was missing is because he had been out of town the entire week before. He didn't know. But maybe the strangest thing so far in all of this is the fact that Adam had Caitlin's phone. It wasn't clear why he had her phone, though. I mean, it wasn't clear if he found it at his condo after he got back from the trip. He was just being really vague about everything. So now, at this point, not only was Caitlin MIA, but she also didn't have her phone with her either. And like I have said so many times on here now, who the heck goes anywhere without their phone? So it was looking like maybe Caitlin had been taken from her home and she left her phone behind because it happened so abruptly. Naturally, investigators asked Adam if they could take a look at both he and Caitlin's phone. They wanted to see if there was any sort of digital footprint. So Adam handed over these phones without question, and the cops started going through all the text messages between the two of them. And when they were looking through it, they saw that a ton of the messages between the two of them had been deleted. But when he was asked about it, Adam didn't have a reason as to why. Then, later that same day, a male tenant who lived in the same Chicago condo building as Caitlin and Adam called the police after he made a horrifying discovery. The man said that he was heading outside and he took the stairs, and then he came across a severed, bloody foot just lying there on the ground. He also saw multiple bloodstains on the wall near the foot. Now, at first, he wasn't sure if this was maybe some sort of elaborate prank or something like that. I mean, this guy thought that maybe this foot wasn't even real because it's not every day you see a random foot just on your way in the stairwell when you're heading out. But it didn't take long for this man to decide that this foot was definitely real. So the police arrived at the condo shortly after. Now, when the officers got to the building, they confirmed that this foot belonged to a human being. But now they needed to figure out who. And just a few moments later, they realized they would have their answer, because the cops found a woman lying in that same stairwell, not very far from where the foot had been found. The severed foot was found in the stairwell on floor 2, and the rest of the body was found in the stairwell on floor 5. And this woman was clearly deceased. Her body was found face down, pulverized, and covered in blood. And based on the injuries, it was determined that she had fallen down 24 floors. As cops worked to ID this woman, it became clear it was Caitlin. So between finding Caitlin in the stairwell and Adam filing a missing persons report earlier that day, the detectives opened up an investigation to try and determine what had exactly happened here. So the cops started with the building's security footage, and they quickly found some inconsistencies in Adam's story. I mean, first off, Adam had told the cops that he had been out of town for practically the entire week, right? But the surveillance footage showed him with Caitlin on October 24th, just a few days before her body was found. It was enough for the cops to become incredibly suspicious of Adam, and they actually ended up arresting him that very day. Now, when they did, they hadn't mentioned that Caitlin's body was found. So as Adam was being handcuffed, he asked the cops, is she alive? Is she okay? Is everything okay? And as the cops dug further into Adam and his story, it became clear he was lying about a lot. And not only that, but they learned that Adam and Caitlin's relationship had a lot of problems as well. And what was really going on in their relationship was actually super dark, which let's just rewind a little bit here for 1 second, because back in October of 2023, Caitlin had filed a restraining order against Adam. This was about 6 months before they got married, just to give you a little bit of a timeline. And when she filed the report, Caitlin cited 3 detailed examples of times that Adam had attacked her. The first incident happened on July 11th, 2023, around 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She said that she was at her home in Michigan, and Adam came over and stripped her naked and attacked her. In her petition, she wrote, quote, "He physically abused me by throwing a pickle jar, which then struck me on the head, punching me, pushing me, pulling my hair, dragging me by my clothes, and stripping me out of my clothes. He also poured vodka on my body, which burned my wounds, and he would motion as if he was going to hit me with the alcohol bottle." Caitlin tried to run away, but eventually Adam caught up with her. So they ended up going to the hospital, and she was treated for a, quote, open head wound. Which to that, I have a feeling that Adam convinced her to tell the staff that it was a fall that she had that gave her the wound, obviously not that he did. The second attack happened the following month on August 21st, 2023, and this time it was at Adam's condo in Chicago, and the attack happened at around 8 a.m. The couple got into a fight, and Adam started to verbally abuse Caitlin by calling her a cheater, a piece of shit, a liar, every word imaginable. But the verbal abuse wasn't enough for Adam, because then he took it to a physical level. And according to Caitlin herself, she said, quote, "He physically abused me by dragging me by my ankle, strangling me, suffocating me, slamming my head against a cabinet, slapping me, punching me, putting my head in a headlock, and dragging me away from the door to prevent me from leaving." And even that wasn't enough for Adam, because this time he went even further than the first time. He took Caitlin's keys, her wallet, her iPad, her phone, so she'd have no way to try and get help. Thankfully, though, she was able to get away by foot, and she headed to a police station nearby. After she spoke with the cops, they went to Adam's condo, but he wouldn't open the door for them. And for whatever reason, I don't know why, but the cops did not push the matter any further. Now, the third attack that led Caitlin to filing the restraining order happened on September 20th, 2023 at the Ritz-Carlton in Chicago. This is where Caitlin was staying at the time. And at around 5:30 that night, Adam came barreling into her room and immediately started to attack her. This time, he also tried sexually her as well. Caitlin didn't give the detectives further details about that attack or why she was staying at the hotel instead of his condo, which I'm speculating here, but I could assume that maybe Caitlin didn't feel safe staying at Adam's place, hence the hotel room, and maybe why Adam wasn't happy. But either way, Caitlin filed a police report for domestic battery. Then, after this incident, Caitlin ended her relationship with Adam, and she finally shared with her parents what she had been going through. Up until that point, they had no idea what their daughter's relationship was really like. They just assumed she was happy. So Caitlin filed a restraining order in October of 2023, saying, "I'm seeking an emergency order of protection because I am fearful for further abuse." Not long after she filed the restraining order, Adam got into Caitlin's head somehow and said that he was going to sue her for defamation and libel. And because of that, it spooked her enough that it was enough to make her drop the petition. And then after that, at some point, the two of them ended up getting back together. But that, of course, was not the end of the abuse, because in January of 2024, the police were called. And when they arrived, she had cuts on her, she had other red markings, and she told the officers that not only had Adam assaulted her, but he had stolen some of her stuff. She was the one who made the 911 call. But allegedly, Adam told her to tell the officers that the 911 call was all an accident. And it was also around this time that Caitlin began confiding in some of her neighbors about the tumultuous relationship with Adam. She would tell them how Adam cut her off from her family and friends, that he was the reason she was no longer working, that he had forced her to quit, and it pretty much appeared that Adam was isolating Caitlin from the world. But for what reason, though? Just for power and control? And even with his history of serious abuse toward her, they still ended up getting married in April of 2024, which, by the way, none of Caitlin's family members attended because she had told her parents about what he had put her through in the past, and they did not support it. Now, I'm sure when Caitlin decided to marry Adam, she did it with hope, hope that maybe now being husband and wife, things might change, they might be different. But of course, we know that in most times and most situations, marriage does not change anything. And in their case, it didn't make Adam turn into, suddenly this kind or rational human being, because later that summer, the second incident happened that year. And this time, it resulted in Adam being taken away in handcuffs. One of Caitlin's neighbors even texted after they saw Adam being hauled off saying, "Are you okay? Do you need me to come down?" And the neighbor figured Caitlin probably wouldn't take him up on this offer because she was pretty independent, but surprisingly, she did say yes. She was so shaken up by the incident, she didn't know what had made Adam snap. She said they were shopping at the grocery store together and that everything seemed fine until it just wasn't. Caitlin said, quote, "I have no idea what I said, but I must have said something to upset him." Then she said he started freaking out, and she told him she was going to lock the doors and not let him in until he calmed down, which, of course, it only fueled his anger more. But at that point, he figured out a different way to get in. So Caitlin just took off. She went running, hiding under the dining room table. But he saw her there, and he yanked her out by the hair. So during that altercation, she was able to grab her phone and call 911. After that incident, she finally ended up getting some space from Adam, and she sent her neighbors a text which read, "Bunny and Joyce, thank you for being fabulous neighbors. Your support and space has meant the world to me. I've been to court twice since you were last over, and yesterday was tough, but moving forward, I have a great advocate in the prosecutor's office." Adam left yesterday in typical fashion, apologizing for any noise, but now it's time to rebuild and move forward with a calmer and healthier life and future relationships. Thank you again for your support. I couldn't have asked for a better community and supporting strong women. I'm around this weekend picking up the pieces that were damaged mentally and physically, but I would love to have a glass of wine or two when you are free. And I feel like that text was pretty telling. I mean, she knew what she had to do. She knew that she had to be done with him once and for all. She also had the support in place, not only from her friends and family, but the advocate and the prosecutor's office, and she really seemed to have the tools and the confidence needed. But then, fast forward to the discovery of her body. And even though it wasn't certain that Adam was the one who did this to her, I'm sure that at the point when she was found dead at her abusive husband's condo complex, the people in Caitlin's life were in some way not surprised and figured it was Adam. But I'm sure they were also upset that the tools and resources that Caitlin had in place weren't enough. That is, if it was in fact Adam who was responsible. But Caitlin had seemed to be done with Adam, so why would she even have been back in his life? Which, let's get back to the day in question, the day that Caitlin's body was discovered, October 27th, 2024. Detectives spoke with Adam and held him for 48 hours on the basis of filing a false missing persons report. Because remember, he got caught lying about being out of town for work that week because he was seen on security footage at his condo. Unfortunately, at that point, the cops didn't have enough to prove that he was the one who murdered Caitlin. And all of a sudden, 48 hours came and went, and he was free to go. They were able to keep part of Adam's phone as part of an investigative hold, even though they couldn't keep Adam himself, but they did still consider him a primary suspect in this. Meanwhile, Caitlin's parents were just in absolute shock hearing the news about their daughter. They knew they wanted to give Caitlin a proper burial, and for them, that meant a full-blown Catholic funeral. But of course, Adam didn't want that. He was hell-bent on cremating Caitlin. He felt like he should be the one who would make that choice too because he was married to her, which her parents felt like they had enough proof and knowledge about Adam's history and of him abusing her to where they could bypass him and make sure that didn't happen. But it actually led to a judge putting a restraining order on Caitlin's remains, all while her body just lay at the medical examiner's office awaiting an official cause of death. And in true Adam fashion, he did not make that process easy.
We're not sure what the defendant is trying to accomplish with these filings. We can't imagine why he would want to keep Caitlin away from her family even now. In the meantime, we will continue to fight until Caitlin is laid to rest, surrounded by family who loved and supported her.
When her parents presented all the evidence they had against Adam being abusive toward Caitlin, a judge ended up ruling in their favor and allowed them to take control of Caitlin's remains. Her family did not make a public statement, but their lawyer did make a statement on their behalf saying, "Today's ruling in Michigan is a critical step in the family's efforts to protect and preserve Caitlin's legacy. The family will continue to fight for Caitlin until she is laid to rest with the respect and dignity that she deserves." And with that ruling, Caitlin's family was able to hold the Catholic service and burial for their daughter that they had hoped for. Adam was not in attendance, and he was also not mentioned in her obituary. Now, even with Caitlin being laid to rest, there were still a lot of unanswered questions, and the biggest one being the cause of her death and why this happened. Of course, things were not looking great for Adam during this, but it also couldn't be ruled out at that time that Caitlin hadn't just fallen down the stairwell herself. A body falling that many floors would certainly have caused enough severe damage like what was seen on Caitlin. So after the funeral, people were hoping for some answers. But the weeks turned into months, and nothing happened. And at this point, Adam was still a free man. Adam's lawyers kept maintaining his innocence, saying Adam had nothing to do with his wife's death, he will continue to appear in court, and we will continue to speak through our filings in court on his behalf. His lawyer also spoke about all the domestic claims that Caitlin had filed against Adam, saying there was no physical violence that Adam had ever directed toward Caitlin. There was no corroboration of any of her claims. There was a layer of emotional volatility to the relationship, but Caitlin enjoyed an incredibly close relationship with Adam's parents and with Adam, which kind of feels sleazy, but they're just trying to protect his client, I guess. And things were actually quiet for Adam for a while. That is until this past March 2025, because Adam found himself in handcuffs and arrested for aggravated assault. Here's the thing though, this arrest of Adam actually had nothing to do with Caitlin's murder investigation.
Arrested at his condo in Chicago, not a fugitive at all.
Adam Beckerink's defense attorney at Chicago's Criminal Courts building denying allegations his client was a fugitive from justice, but Cook County Judge Antara Nath Rivera refusing to release Beckerink, citing the Michigan arrest warrant. There was a finding of probable cause on the warrant from Michigan, Cook County spokespeople say. The defendant then waived extradition. Michigan authorities have 30 days to pick him up. A Chicago police sergeant, according to the arrest report, and an 18th District tactical officer arresting Beckerink Friday in his condo on the 1200 block of South Prairie Avenue. He'll remain in the Cook County Jail for now, waiting for Berrien County, Michigan's sheriff's deputies to pick him up to return him to Michigan, where he faces half a dozen felony counts ranging from domestic violence to resisting and assaulting two police officers. His Berrien County trial set for April 15th.
He had nothing to do with his wife's death.
Adam had assaulted police officers back in August of 2024. This was related to the second time police were called to Caitlin's Michigan home that year. So he was supposed to attend a pretrial hearing for that incident in October of 2024, but he didn't show up for it. When the actual trial was supposed to begin, he was being held at the Chicago Police Department in relation to her death. So essentially, he was being arrested for an outstanding warrant and was then transferred to Michigan for his trial on aggravated abuse charges, which was set to happen on April 15th, 2025. So obviously, there was always suspicion that Adam was behind Caitlin's murder, but there were never any charges that had been filed against him. Until now, because on October 20th, Adam was sentenced to 93 days in jail, followed by 2 years of probation. Now, this isn't directly for the murder, but it is for the domestic dispute charge and contempt of court after he had pleaded no contest to the charges. And then 5 days after that, a new charge against Adam, first-degree murder. Now, the criminal complaint said that Adam killed Caitlin on October 25th, 2024, and that he did this by, quote, throwing her over the railing of the 24th floor of the east stairwell. And this was at the condo building where Adam lives. So this was obviously a huge move in Caitlin's case. And her family made a statement a few days later saying, "We dearly miss Caitlin, as do her friends. Our family hopes that during the murder case against Adam, that the truth about the last months of Caitlin's life and the events leading up to her tragic death are revealed. That so our wonderful daughter can finally be laid to rest." So like I said, we've been following this for several months now, and it looks like now there is finally some forward motion, which we love to see that. We love when justice happens. So I will continue following this one very closely to see what happens, to see exactly what the motive was, what really happened. I think we probably all have an idea of that and, can speculate a little bit, but thank goodness they finally got this guy, because what scum. I mean, honestly, awful human being. So that is what we've got for this week with headline highlights. I will be back on the mic with you first thing Monday morning with an all new episode of Serialously. And as a reminder, we also now do 10 to Life, which is our second true crime show, as a podcast. So if you're a podcast listener and not a YouTube watcher, that's totally fine. You get the exact same content, just on the two different podcasts. So new episodes every Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and bonus episodes every other Friday. So just make sure that you're following both of those podcasts, Serialously and 10 to Life. They're on all the podcast platforms. And as a reminder too, for my YouTube watchers who don't love the censorship that YouTube does, all the